just to introduce myself, I'm Jasmin Habezai-Fekri. I'm a 3D environment artist from Cologne, Germany. And right now I am working at Airship Syndicate. And before that, I was freelancing on different projects, most recently with Airborne and also Monomy Park. And before that, or during freelancing, I was still at university for the past 3.5 years. And I actually finished my course in February this year, and this is what also the Hippopura Sanctuary was for. It was my final university project to then leave and get my degree. And just to introduce what the project even was and what the purpose of this environment initially is, was that it was the practical part of my thesis, because we had to separate it into 80% practical, anything we want to do was fine, and 20% theoretical, which was completely disconnected from what I did visually. I did something about how history is represented in games, but that's not the topic today. But for my practical part, I wanted to just apply everything I learned in the past 3.5 years in this environment, which means having a 3D environment that's game ready, that is somewhat playable, that you can at least walk through it, and being as modular and efficient with it as possible, because my time frame was pretty small. I had some time between late October to mid-January for this, and at the same time I was also working part-time and trying to figure out what to do after uni. So yeah, I had to manage my time pretty efficiently, which I will also talk about later in the talk, how I managed to stay on track in these 2.5 months and got to a finishing point with this project. But yeah, the whole project is actually based on a concept art by Jourdan Tuffan. He did a really cool level design, which I was really excited to see in a concept. There were lots of breakdowns and prop call-out sheets, and he even did this little video with the scale reference of the character that's walking through the level. And the level, in his initial idea, was that the hippo is shooting out bubbles and the player gets attacked by it, and you can jump to the different balconies. And having that in mind was pretty good, because I could then imagine how the player should be walking around in the space, how the distances should be. And even though I didn't get to make it like playable in that sense that you get attacked by bubbles, it still was really cool to see what his vision for this level was. And as soon as he agreed to let me use this for my thesis, I just started straight away, and it was great having his support throughout the project as well. He gave me really good feedback on it, and I wanted to make sure that it fits to what he had imagined for this place. Planning this initially was a bit overwhelming. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. When you see such a big scale thing, you get a bit empty in your head and think, oh God, how am I going to do this? It's a bit too much. And then I start to think, did I decide on a bit of a too ambitious project for my thesis? But then I calmed down again. I was like, okay, I'm going to break this down into different aspects. And what I love to do is colored paint overs and just see what shapes are repeating in the environment, what materials are seen everywhere several times, and where I can utilize tiling textures, where I can use trims, and where there would be maybe an opportunity to have modular pieces instead of just a trim. And what's also great, at that point, I was playing Genshin Impact, and I really liked actually the way they handled scale and detail. Since my level was also going to be in the third-person view, I was looking at other games, and Genshin was my first reference. I remember how my partner, Ryan, was like, oh, just look at some games and get some idea about how they deal with scale. And sometimes you kind of tend to forget to do that. I think when you make environments, you just focus on your own work and how you're going to do that, but it's actually great to just play some games and look how they deal with the scale and take loads of screenshots and try to adapt that. So initially I wanted to have a similar feel as Genshin has it, with their props and the way they deal with details and yeah, the initial scale of the environments. And the first thing I did actually for this project was make this trim sheet. I just wanted to have something quickly there to try out and see if this trim sheet as somewhat plant-based on these paintings from Jourdan, if that would make sense. As you can see, I had some of the shapes that you can see at the bottom of the hippo, at even the shapes that are inside the arch, the red little ornaments, and just general golden blocks that are seen across the environment. And I put that into Unreal. I also had some super quick and kind of ugly now in retrospect brick texture and some other concrete textures I had from my older projects, and just put them inside Unreal and wanted to see what it looks like in the scale that I'm trying to achieve. Because I personally don't really like to do too much gray boxing. I like to have some colors and textures in there, even though the placeholders are not really pretty. It still helps me to get a better idea. And with that ready, I started to do some very basic blockouts in Blender. I just put them quickly inside Unreal to see what it feels like, also especially in regards to the character and the scale of everything. And then I started to just use random shapes inside Unreal and also for my own blockout inside Unreal and scaled them in insane ways and tried to somehow build the temple based on what I had from these shapes. Like, as you can see, when I put it back into Blender on the left, nothing matches anymore. It's all a mess, but that's fine because I'm not focusing on making it look pretty right now. It's just for seeing what I have to do, if it's possible, if the scale is right, just to get a general feel of this and get out of the blockout and phase where you're like, oh my god, I can't get this project started. At least this way you have something there and it starts to look like something. And then based on that blockout that I did in Unreal, as you can see on the left, I exported that back into Blender and then started refining that a bit more. That means I actually made the platforms a bit more fleshed out. I even did the arch a bit better. I implemented the railings just to see if the height of them is fitting. And that was actually quite nice. In this case, I also just used the trims. I didn't do any unique things at all, and I just wanted to see how far I could get away with just using this one trim that I made. And to be honest, I was getting kind of stuck at this point because I was thinking, okay, I use this trim everywhere, but it looks kind of bad. I don't really like this, even though of course nothing is set up properly and my reflection captures are insane and not very great to look at. But still, I didn't think it had that nice used feel that Jourdan's concept had, that it didn't look abandoned, it looked too clean. I know I don't have decals or anything on it yet, but still I didn't think it was going the right direction. So I started to go back and looked for some references again. And one of my main reference points were then looking at Spyro, because they used a lot of this technique where they had different individual chunks of modular pieces that were put together. Same in Overwatch with the railings and the brick wall. I really liked how they approached that because it looked very organic still. And I really love Glenn Fox's work because he also has these really cool individual pieces that he then puts together. It makes these, but they feel much more chunky and not as flat if you just have like a flat trim texture. They're more like, yeah, it gives a better look to the overall environment. I think when you go for this more 3D-esque trim and modular look than going for all flat trims. So I went back to, yeah, my modeling board. Actually started to go into ZBrush and tried to break up the balcony into different pieces. And here I tried to see if I can get away with basically having 3 of the little ornaments of the circular shapes, 3 of the flower shape that's in the middle, like 3 of each part from that aspect. And then on the arches and the little pillars, I just made 1 of each because I thought you can just rotate them and get a different look of this pillar like pretty easily. You can leverage that. And with the arch, I thought because I'm using this arch several times in the environment, I can just sculpt the whole bit. I'm sure it would have been fine to probably mirror it as well in the middle, but I thought may as well just, yeah, have fun sculpting, which I did in this case. And the same with the floor. The floor, if you look at these screenshots, I actually had just a flat texture, and I was thinking, okay, this doesn't look great, and I think even with adding some height maps to it or whatever, it will still look weird. So I just decided to make chunks of the floor and then reuse that all across the environment. And then I started to do the same for some other parts of the temple to see where I can basically add to this little set I made. As you can see, the pieces on the left and the right, they are from the balcony as here. But then I added like this arch in the middle, that's from the main structure of the temple, and then some little smaller pillars or ornaments, or the little railing pillars that you can see all across the main platforms, just to have these individual pieces ready and then assemble it. And I can actually show you that in Engine in a second, but I didn't get rid of trims completely. I kept a very simple trim sheet. As you can see, I really reduced it, I scaled it all up, and I matched it to the actual heights of the meshes that I had blocked out, and checked how many different thicknesses I need of this gold trim, and not just randomly make a trim and see if it fits for everything. And that worked quite well to mix and match and not just go for the fully trim approach. And with the tiling textures, I still needed 2 concrete textures, and I just vertex paint them all across, and same with the brick texture. I just started refining it a bit more. And as you can see, that's before mixing the modular pieces and the tiling textures. And after that, I can actually show you now what it was in the end like in Unreal. As you can see, obviously, this is the finished product. After I implemented that, it didn't look like this, but it didn't change much since that time I started then putting the individual pieces. Like, for example, this is the big main arch, and it's just constructed of the same middle piece that you can see on this balcony. The only thing I did is that I then started booleening the broken parts and remapping them onto other parts of the texture I already had, because you can really get away with that. And to be honest, when you're the player and you're down here, you would never see this arch that is wrongly textured on that bit where it's broken. And I will explain that later too. I also have a moss master material and everything, so as you can see, that part is fully covered, like nobody's going to see that. And yeah, I use these arches everywhere. They're here, they're over here, they're down here. These are also the railings, the little pillars. They are individual. I made 2 variants of that, and some broken ones, as you can see, that I just booleaned again. And these are then the trims that I had here, and all the railings, it's all the trims. Here I mixed the trim with the individual pieces that I made. And this side, actually, I never showed this anyone because I was intended to first make the full place. Then I ran out of time. This also goes back to project planning. When you realize you don't have time, just try to cut in some, I would say, clever ways that you can get away with it. And I thought I can get away with just focusing on one side of the temple and leave this one out. But this is where I also heavily ended up using the trim sheet. Like, this whole thing is just made out of the trim and the tiling textures. I didn't end up making anything unique for that side because I didn't have the time. But I think I could have got away with just playing around with the trims here as well and not make even more modular pieces. I could probably make a couple, but it's still, I would have a solid base to continue this side even if I wanted to, but I didn't want to anymore. I didn't have time. Same with these stairs, actually. I didn't show that they're also very modular. I made like I think 3 or 4 brick variants. There's very little, and then I just stacked them all together. I stuck some on the side, put a tiling texture here again, and then curved it with a curve modifier inside Blender, and yep, just stuck them all here. And as you can see, moss, world space moss is great for making it look less repetitive. I was able to like paint in and out whatever I wanted. Yeah, and that's, as you can see, you can then make it look a bit more unique and interesting without people seeing that you're reusing the same 3 bricks all over these staircases. And then obviously adding some plants, and yeah, you can get pretty far with that. But yeah, I really like this approach, having these modular pieces, and you don't really waste that much textures in general either, because in the end I was reusing this arch and everything else so many times in this scene that it paid off to go for this, I think. But yeah, after I had the base of the structures done, another big part of my project was the organic side of this place, which I would say is even taking more space than the architecture. And for here, I wanted to be clever in how I approached this too, because first I didn't want to sculpt many rocks. I don't enjoy it that much. In the end, it is quite fun if you do it over and over, but in this case, I thought I can get away with maybe sculpting just one and see how it goes. Same for the trees. I personally do really like making foliage in trees, but I didn't see it as feasible to sculpt every single tree in the scene, especially because they have super complicated roots. They're growing into each other, over each other, connecting and all that jazz. So we have to find a way to do it efficiently and quickly in the time we have. So with the rock, I did get away by just having one rock. This is the same rock, just rotated. And then I did make a couple of pebble versions. I can show you in Unreal 2. This is literally just this one rock that I kept rotating, even scaling shamelessly around, and putting some moss on top. And that moss really helped as well because I could paint in the corners, and I have a mask on my moss material as well, so that the moss doesn't just sit perfectly on the top. I can actually paint it in and out if I want to, which I can quickly show, as you can see. Yeah, it masks it out slightly. Like, this rock is not super dense either in terms of poly count. So wanted to keep the performance nice linear with having that much foliage. But yeah, I was basically sitting at the last 2 weeks of this project doing a lot of vertex paint on my rocks to see what looks nicely, that it doesn't look too artificial. Because if you just use the default world space settings and just have the moss on top on every single rock, it doesn't look right. It just looks weird and wrong, I think, and not very natural. So you do have to go in and do it a bit manually. But yeah, I think I got away pretty well with just using this one rock. Obviously, you could make it even more organic by adding more, but I always think it's good to try and be simple about things if you can. And these were like some of the iterations with the rock art. As you can see here on the bottom left, that's where I had no masks on my moss, and it was just flat sitting on top. But then as soon as you can see on the right side, I added the mask, it adds a bit of this nice like blobby shapes on the edges, and it doesn't feel as clean and neatly arranged moss that's just sitting there as if somebody sugarcoated these rocks. Then onto the trees, which was the bigger challenge. Here I did actually end up sculpting the main trunks of the trees that are growing around the balconies, because most of the balconies had a tree growing around them or any type of roots. So I thought I may as well sculpt some trees, and I got pretty fast at it, so I thought I can spend some time on that. And here I just usually use Z-spheres that I then neatly arrange around the mesh that I already had, which in this case was the balcony. And then I start just sculpting each trunk, mostly with the damp standard brush and H polish, and then I add some orb cracks brush and damp standard at the end to get the crevices of the trees and the bark a bit more defined, that it doesn't feel too veiny in a sense, but like that at least there are the main veins of the tree visible and the bark. And I also love to use the inflate brush just to add some little thickness variations on where the eye of the tree is basically, and yeah, just to give it some chunk. That's always a good rule to follow. Yeah, and that's the other tree that I sculpted, which is on the main side of the temple on the left. And since that one had also a pretty unique shape, I just thought I'll also sculpt that one. And then now we go into the part, because as you saw probably, the temple is filled with lots and lots of vines and little roots. And here I thought it's best to just try and play around with blueprints and splines. In this case, for the thin vines, I did 2 tileable meshes that just tile horizontally, and you can deform them pretty well, which I will show in a second. And for the rest of the roots, though, because as you can see in these concepts, they are not just super thin roots, they're actually in the minority here. It's mostly also pretty thick roots. And in my sculpts, I just focused on the main thick roots, but left out all the smaller ones, because as I said, it would just be too much time invested in making all those. So I just thought, why not cut my tree up, all the small roots that I made, and put them also into the spline system. Why not? And if I just thought to myself, I can give it a go. If it doesn't work, if it looks weird, I'll probably have to sculpt just some more roots and put it in the same spline system. But let's give it a try this way, and I can show you that this worked because the scene is filled with a lot of splines. All the circles you can see are different spline blueprints, and they blend in pretty well, in my opinion. Like, I was happy to see that this works. Like, as you can see here, that's the main tree that I sculpted, I showed you earlier. And this is just one of the co-op zombie versions that I put in. This one actually has a spline as well. The one underneath too, they all just like blend pretty well together. I just hid it behind this rock. But yeah, with the splines, you can easily just rotate them, scale them even a bit, but I wouldn't go for that too much. But mostly move them across the spline. And that really helped to just make it fit into these places, like especially when you can scale this root up super high and suddenly you have a very different look to this, and you can reuse this in several places, or you can move it back onto the rock that can grow onto it a bit better. It's really neat. And again, the moss shader is here to save the day. Since it blends pretty well together, you can get away with having this co-op Frankenstein mesh and just painting some flowers on top. And that way you can get away with that. And I did that everywhere with this. Like, as you can see, all of these are just stuck in this tree. So I can, yeah, expand the roots. Obviously, I didn't follow one-to-one the concept because I thought that would just be a bit too much. Like, I always like to use the concept as a blueprint. Yeah, I'm using blueprints. But not as like a one-to-one replica in my environments, because in the end then you focus too much on wanting to get it just right, just one-to-one the same. And it's fine when people do that, I think that's great. But in my case, I think it's nice to have some of like artistic freedom, or give your own flavored environment by just trying out different things. And in this case, I really like the tech with the blueprints. It worked out nicely, so I thought I'll just play around with it and make my own 3 iterations on that. And I think if I would have more than these amounts of roots that I had for this style, it would just get a bit too busy. Like, I was already struggling with the fact that the scene doesn't get overly populated. I did the same also with the floor roots. That was another thing I was a bit worried about how to pull off, but that was even easier. You could, as I said, do the same. You get some interesting, like, little happy accidents out of that. Like here, that the mesh just scales out a bit more, this fork shape. Same with this one. I really liked how this one actually comes out a bit when I pulled my spline and rotated it upwards, so that it's growing underneath the rocks, which is really fun to play with. But I can show you, actually, I've got 2 spline blueprints. This is like a very basic one if it opens. This one was just for deforming the meshes. It wasn't for the tiling one because, as I said, I only made 2 tiling meshes. For the tiling one, it just adds like that extra function for tiling it across the horizontal sides, as you can see on this twisty one. I actually like this one the most. But hard to find a spot where you can actually see this. But this one is actually pretty neat because yeah, you can deform this pretty nicely always and have like an endlessly long vine going there. Yeah. But yeah, it takes a bit of time to get used to like navigating them and shaping them in the way you want to. But yeah, you can do a lot with them. And actually, I also used blueprints and splines for the fish that are in the water here. I can actually show that quickly, but yeah, it's a great tech to look into. It probably would be a bit too much if I get into that now as well, but I just wanted to show you guys that you can use it in several occasions, and especially for roots, it's amazing. Like, without this tool, I would have probably not got away with having so many roots and splines and whatever growing literally everywhere in this temple. So yeah, definitely look into that. And yeah, another big part of this environment, I got this question also a lot in general, how I do my foliage. And for this, I love to sculpt them inside ZBrush, and I give them a lot of thickness. So when I bake them down, they don't look fully flat and lose that kind of 3D feel. And yeah, I just always start from scratch in ZBrush. I paint out the shape on the plane, extrude that, and then start just moving around with the move brush, and there's not really anything special going on, to be honest. But I always like to also plan out the plant sets that I'm making. As you can see here, I had one set that was mostly for leafed plants, I would say, and the flowers, and that you can see all across the environment. Then my second set was for more of the plants that have one main leaf that then grows out through the middle. And then I assembled even like smaller versions with the big leaf I had. I tried to get as many variations as I could. And my third set was more of for the water plants or the mossy type of plants you can see. And here I really liked actually the ones that look like long hair. That I usually see them hanging from trees, also in jungles where the moss is growing down the trees. And here I just put them on a plane and then yeah, pulled it up in the middle. It's a bit weird to explain, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. You get the comparison to the texture sheet and the meshes, and the blobs are just remapped onto my lily pads because I thought I could just be lazy in that case. I can also show you inside Unreal, because with these 3 sheets, I ended up having like 30 plus variations of plants that I could paint around with the foliage tool inside Unreal. And what I really liked to do was using the bucket tool and just fill like different tiles, especially on the floor. This was great with plants. Adjust the size, of course. This one was very small, but sometimes you could get really cool results out of it, and then start painting it out again when you go on here, and then erase, density goes up. But yeah, I did the same on the water, but with the blobs, actually, yeah, I think I hand placed these one, and not the lily pads, but the blobs, because I just wanted to see what colors go where. But then I ended up just duplicating bunches of that around. And as you can notice as well, I didn't want outlines on the plants that are intersecting. You can see they have only like this greenish outline. So there is some things that don't look like they're floating completely, but I thought it would be way too distracting if everything had like a white, cartoony, stylized outline. So I thought this was pretty neat that the plants can kind of blend more into the environment, and as a player as well, you can then indicate easily, okay, I need to go there because this is the main place, and this outline guides you a bit better, I think, than if everything is treated the same way, basically, in terms of detail and yeah, shading. But yeah, with plants, there's not much to it than just sitting there and dressing the place with plants, painting them around. As you can see, I've got like very odd numbers on all these. Like some of them I've got 4,000 instances of it. This is mostly for the very small ones that you can see here that are growing like in between the arches or even on the trees here. But for the bigger plants, there's way less instances because they're pretty big. And as I said, I was struggling a bit with the fact how much plants I can put in, if it's too much, if it's too little. So yeah, it's good to keep a balance between them. And another thing I hand placed was, I think, these moss things as well, because you have to like kind of scooch them between the mesh. Oh yeah, I don't have it underneath for this one. But it's also okay, because when you play the game, actually, I don't think, can I play this without everything crashing? Oh wait, I think something's not working anymore. Oh, this could work, yeah. From this viewpoint, it's fine. Like, you won't be really seeing it. I think at some point I even had the camera closer, so that's probably why I didn't have the underneaths. But yeah, that's what I would test most of the time, just walking around with Unreal Man and seeing what it looks like. But yeah, this leads us to the last part of my presentation, is how to stay on track, basically. So this is a tricky one because I had many times in this project where I didn't feel like going on because it just felt like very overwhelming what I had to do. But what really helped was kind of on one hand having Miro. Jeremy actually also talked about this today earlier on the stream, which I thought was interesting. And I use Miro a lot, and I recommend it to anyone I know because I just love it. And that's where I also did my initial planning for the modularity. Like I didn't end up following a lot of these things that I set up for myself first, but it's still good to have it on paper, well, on digital paper, and being able to come back to it and having an easy way of just putting your thoughts on to something like this, and then it feels more like you've done something actually, even though you didn't start modeling yet or putting things in the engine, but still it gives you a better idea of where your project is going to be at some point. And you can also keep track of your progress by just putting your screenshots here. I also did the same here for the foliage, where I try to identify which type of foliages I have in the environment. Obviously, I didn't follow this also one by one, but I still wanted to see if I can keep them in mind, basically, and have these different categories of like plants that grow in structures, plants that are in the water, plants that are just existing basically in the space without being attached to structures, etc. Like, yeah. And it's great for also keeping like style references in one place, or if you have specific lighting presets that you wanted to keep in mind from other projects, or keeping all your references for scaling in one place too, which I did with Genshin Impact. Another program I really love to use for organizing is Notion. For Notion, I also did like a little blog post for myself. I had one for my theory part, and I had one for my practical. And here I actually wrote down every week what I've done. I really wrote it as if somebody's going to read this. Like, imagine you just pretend you're writing an 80-level article or ArtStation blog post. In retrospect, I think I could have done this on ArtStation too. But I think on Notion it's pretty cool because you have all these options of just easily dragging everything in, writing like these little undertitles, having like options to paste in videos, take little notes, and make tasks even for yourself. I think I still have the tasks that I made for myself here, yeah, with the props I need to do, or what videos I need to watch for something specific that I want to do. But yeah, Notion was really great. And for later on, if you ever want to do a breakdown for something, or like for now, the Dinusty talk, this was really great because I could go back on my stuff and have a look. How did I approach this, like week by week? And even for later, if I start another project that's the same scale, I can have a look and see what problems I had, what I struggled with, and see how I solve these issues as well. Because it's great when you solve these things, but sometimes you just forget about it or don't write it down, and then next time you might run into the same issue again, but you forgot how you actually solved it back then. Like, I think it's good to keep like these little notes because we can't keep everything in mind. But yeah, I really liked to do this. I know I had to do this also because of my thesis. They demanded me to have some sort of documentation, but I'm really glad they did because yeah, this was really neat to see. Like in retrospect, like, yeah, I made the moss shader and was really proud that I could paint on my hippo now and make him look all mossy, and it was very satisfying. And I think that's like my biggest tip always for like staying motivated, is having these little achievements for yourself where you see like, oh, I managed to get this done this week. Like here this week I was working on the moss shader and like the base texture pass on my hippo, and I was really excited about that because now with this shader I could paint on everything. Like as you can see here you can actually also see the masking of the moss a bit better, by the way. But yeah, having these like little milestones that you achieve every week, or just writing even down what you've done that week, makes it seem like a lot more than you might have expected it yourself. Like I think sometimes we kind of play down what we've managed to do in a week, but if you actually look back on it, it's quite nice. Like you did something. If you sat down and like wanted to maybe learn something about a shader or whatever, it's worth noting that down and like having something to prove that, I would say, like even like this for yourself and not having to show it to anyone. But yeah, this was pretty cool to keep track with, and I think I will keep this also for other projects, so I can yeah, do this every time. I even wrote down how my pipeline works for this, so I know it for next time, because I liked how these props turned out for this project. So next time I'll make a prop in this way, I can go back on this and see how I got these results basically. And yeah, it's pretty neat. I really recommend everyone doing fake blog posts for yourself every week just to keep track of what you're doing. But yeah, I think that's basically it from me. Thanks everyone for listening, and I hope this was somewhat informative and helpful for you. But yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to yeah, write them in the chat or anywhere. I would love to help. Thank you.
That was awesome. That was so good.
Thank you.
Wow, you're even you did all of that in 35 minutes. That's
Oh,
that was
really?
so much information. Yeah, that was so good. No, there's a lot of people asking in chat about where this will be afterwards, and so it'll be on the Empire YouTube channel after DinCon. So you'll be able to go back, and I'll even cut it up so it's got chapters, so everyone
Oh,
can.
awesome.
Yeah, so it's easier to kind of go through, figure out where you're looking. But yeah, we can get right into the questions. And if you're looking, you can go on the Discord, and there's a channel called Questions for DinCon, and you can ask your questions there. Let me know if Jasmine's too quiet compared to my voice. I think everything looks balanced, but you never know on the other end. Okay, so Polygon asked, as you've grown and developed as an artist, were there concepts or processes you struggled with? If so, how did you overcome them?
I think one of the main things I struggled with, and still is like an ongoing thing, is to figure out how to do things the most efficient way and in a way that still looks good. Like, I think when I started as an artist, I always thought I have to do everything uniquely. I have to texture every asset by itself because only that way you get the most out of it and it looks the best. But I realized over the past years that that's actually not the case. Like, people do so many ways of approaching an asset that really speeds up your process. You can reuse things and nobody notices these things. And I didn't have that mindset at the start. I only developed, I think, maybe in the past 2 years. And that was a bit difficult to wrap my head around because I would always think efficiency kind of lowers the visual quality, but that's not true at all. Like, I think you can do still very stunning and beautiful artwork with being super clever and efficient about it. And we see that every day with people doing procedural stuff and reusing assets and all that. And I think that's something that you need to learn with time, that you don't have the time and you shouldn't have to go about everything as if it's like one piece of artwork. Like, the whole big image matters much more than your one single asset that you spend like months working on. That's but it's difficult to, I think, realize that as an artist sometimes because we want to spend time on art and do our best.
Yes. So Paul also said, "Congrats on the new job, totally deserved. How are you
Thank you.
finding the transition from college to work?"
I think it's been pretty good because I got used to working already by just doing freelance on the sides besides of university, but it still is obviously very different to doing it now full time every day. And I need to kind of remind myself that I don't have to spend every minute also on my personal projects and just take time for myself. I think during uni that was easier to just do lots of personal projects, but I really enjoy working on a team now on a really cool project, and yeah, it's very motivating. I think I'm getting used to it well.
It's oh, how do I word this one? I'll just literally read it. How would you recommend a guaranteed method to get motivated to do personal work?
Oh god. What worked for me was reminding myself that I've managed to finish something else before. Obviously, this is difficult if you're just starting out with art. There might not be anything you finished before, but even if it's like one project you've done in the past and you managed to go fully through it, and you remind yourself how difficult that must have been and how demotivated you maybe were in between, but you actually managed to go through it, that personally gives me a lot of strength and reminds me that I managed to do this before in some way, even if it's not the same project, but I did have the willpower, let's say, or like the brain power to do it. So I should do it. I should just go for it. And another motivation is obviously for me, seeing like other artists I really admire doing like amazing projects, and that always gets me in the mood of, oh, I want to try something like this and see if I can do this. And that's like a thin line. Sometimes that can also demotivate a bit, but I think you can have a healthy relationship with that and get the motivation out of seeing that how others are doing really cool work and that you want to do something similar as well.
There's a question as well about the inspiration, like you were talking on. It's, what do you base your modeling on particular games? And I guess there's the Genshin Impact.
Yeah, Genshin was when I played it, I was really interested in the art style and how they did everything. And even though this project was very different to it, I think in mood and style. Other than that, I I think my main inspirations in the past years have been like all across the board. Like I had this phase where I was really into battle chases. I loved the hand painted textures of that. Then I had this phase where I was really into how Overwatch did their textures and everything. And then uh, like I didn't always look at specific games. I tried to like do like this big library of all the art styles I really enjoyed over the years, and then kind of do a big mash of it of what I enjoyed doing, and took like the best of picked out like the things that inspired me the most. But I think the base of everything for me, what used to be always Animal Crossing. That was the main game I always loved. And when I got into PBR, that was also the time where the new Animal Crossing came out, and yeah, that's when I started to also look at that a lot. So Animal Crossing has been accompanying me throughout my life, my art life a lot.
Such a good game.
It is.
So what are some things that you wish you could have told yourself, your younger self, when you were starting to get into 3D art? It's like,
that's a difficult one. I think maybe that it's okay not to know everything straight away. Like,
yeah.
because I thought when I started 3D, and I thought that for a long time, that like, especially as an environment artist or as a 3D artist, you have to know every single thing, and you have to be like a master of every aspect of creating the environment, and everyone expects you to know all these things straight away, but that's not true. Like, it's fine to start somewhere and not overwhelm yourself with the things that are out there. So I would probably tell myself not to pressure myself too much into having to, yeah, excel at everything, because that can get very stressful very quickly. And also not compare myself with other people who have been working for years, or even not like just focus on my own progress and growth, and not on how others have got there maybe faster than me, or in any other way. Like, uh, as a young artist, I think it's easy to get like this impression that you have to be good quick, and that was this pressure I had, I think, when I got started. But I would probably tell myself to chill out a bit.
It's so easy to say, right?
It is.
How much of your workflow depends on manual hand painting, and how much of your process has been quote unquote automated these days with tools like Substance Painter?
I still like to hand paint my base colors a lot, and like my curvature map, because I don't like the default curvature map you get out of baking. I think it's important to modify that and add like your hand painting touch to it. So I do still have like this hand painting pass on my work. Recently, it was a bit less, especially for this project. I just did a bit of like hand painting on the rocks or the plants and the curvature of everything, but I didn't spend a lot of time on it because it just didn't fit into the time frame. But I would always recommend, if you enjoy hand painting, it can be a really good benefit, I think, for your textures, to add that pass on top of it, because I still like to do that and think it's worth it to spend that time.
Do you have any tips for someone doing their first stylized project?
I would recommend picking a concept that you really like that's stylized. and try to analyze that like to the teeth of how they manage to do the colors, the shapes, and see how you can, if you can replicate that into 3D one-to-one. I think at that point it's okay to try to aim for replicating things one-to-one, because it really helps you to understand what this concept artist, who presumably then does stylized art, managed to bring these shapes into the 2D space, and then trying to replicate them into 3D makes you understand and appreciate them, I think, a lot more. And that's what I did a lot when I did my first hand-painted projects. I picked really cool concept art that did great like color theory work and also shape language, and tried to do that into 3D as good as I could. And even though it wouldn't look one-to-one the same, I still would get so much out of it and learn so many new things, how to approach things and how to deal with colors and composition, which I didn't have any idea before about how to deal with. I think that's really important, that you try to replicate really well done concept art, or like maybe do a fan art of a prop that's already existing in a game like, I don't know, Sea of Thieves or World of Warcraft, and see if you can analyze the shapes and the colors as good as you can, because you'll gain a lot out of that, I think.
This next question's kind of broad, but what skills should I focus on demonstrating in my environment portfolio, like must-haves, in your opinion?
I think it's great to show that you can work modular, that you can make an environment efficiently with tiling textures as have modular parts, that you can, I think that you have some understanding of not just the technical side, but also the artistic side of things, that you understand how colors work, how to have appealing lighting, present your work well. I think that's one thing I sometimes see, is that people have like this really cool prop or environment, and then the presentation lets it down a lot. I think that's also a great skill to showcase. But for environment art, I would probably show you like a bit of everything, like in terms of building an environment, doing some shader work, doing some lighting, doing some tiling textures. Even if it's just in a small scale, you don't have to go on full on crazy and build a full level. It can also be a small diorama, and in that one you already can showcase how to reuse assets or use tiling textures. That's already great, because if you can pull it off on a small scale, I'm sure you could reuse those same things and make a big scale environment. And that's already very promising, I think, for people to see that you can pull that off.
This next question got answered, but it was, what did you use for journaling your process? And then it got edited and said, since you answered those, so it was Notion and Miro. Do they use, are you using free versions, or like, is it worth getting paid ones?
They're both free. With Miro, I try to leverage the most out of it by making either new accounts or by joining different team projects from like uni projects, and would forget that I made my board on somebody else's board, which obviously I would not do for an NDA project, but for your personal projects, that's completely fine, I think. But yeah, they're both free. Notion is completely free, and you have a lot of space, I would say, on there as well to paste in as many images you want. So I think you can very much stay on the free programs on that side, in my opinion.
How are you doing, by the way? We're about halfway through the questions.
Oh, now I'm fine.
Yeah? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay, cool. How do you go about planning your trim sheets for your scene in terms of size and what you need the piece to be?
First, as I showed in the talk about, I go through what I see in the concept and try to gauge a bit, I would say, if there's specific sizes that are repeating all across the board. Sometimes that can get a bit tricky, because obviously the concept artist doesn't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to draw this in a way that it makes sense on a trim sheet. So it's probably better to then start modeling out, I would say, the main pieces of your environment, where you see that there's a repeating shape or pattern, or in this case, I had like gold bars. I've seen clearly in the concept that there were different depths of it. So I would model them out and see, okay, this one that is roughly in the scale of the game, I would say 0.5 meter high. Do I have this more than once in this environment? And then I would just kind of match up my trim sheet to that, and then make a base trim sheet, try out to make most of the assets with that trim sheet, or very basic versions, like not the final meshes, just something you can do in in an hour or two. And then when you already start modeling out these bits of your environment, I think you quickly can realize what works and what doesn't. If you realize you have to scale your meshes like in crazy amounts, that you scale them halfway down or double the amount that you have on your trim sheet, then you realize, okay, maybe I need another trim added to this section because I'm running out of options and the texture is getting super stretched or tiling too much. Yeah, I think, and also keeping the textile density in mind for these things. If you can get away with scaling it that much, like sometimes you can, in some cases you can. Like with me, I had these parts, like here, for example, where you can see the, what is it? Oh yeah, where it cuts through the bars. And if I would have scaled it too much, you could really see just the repeating patterns of the roughness and everything. And so you have to be very mindful, I think, of that and see how much you can get away with if you realize you have to scale things too much. Yeah, just add another part in your trim, I would say.
Awesome. Is there the next question is like, how long did this project take you from planning to finish?
I saw this concept quite a while ago, but then actually starting to plan it was mid-October. And then I pitched it to my university without any blockouts, just the concept. And they said, okay. And I actually didn't plan anything at that point either, because I just wanted to make sure they say it's fine. And then I started planning at the end of October and finished the project on the 15th of January. That was my deadline, actually. That's when I had to hand it in. Yeah, I think by January 5th or something like that, I was basically done with the environment. I was just doing like polish on some assets that I thought that I can polish at the end if I have time. So that was like the week where I was just going over assets and not making anything new or major changes anymore.
That's awesome. Is that Ben Wilson wants to see the wireframes and the render buffers.
Oh god. Yeah, sure. You can see the wireframes of this.
You did say vertex painting, and I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, like all this is vertex paint, but obviously, yeah, it's a bit dense on those parts. This hippo, I would have to admit, I didn't retopo properly. I did zero mesh because I ran out of time. Like I started to retopo the head, and I was like, okay, this is gonna take me longer than I want to in my time frame. So I'm just gonna be zero mesh and then clean it up in Blender. But that helped with the vertex paint. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have all the vertices you need to paint.
Yeah, yeah. But it's not crazy. Like I can still play this. Like my computer is not amazing. My graphics card is also getting dated, I would say. But it's running still pretty fine. I can see in the optimization viewpoint shader complexity. Okay. That's where we're at. The god rays are kind of killing it underwater. But
as they do.
yeah. But it's not too bad. I personally expect it's going to be worse than this. But yeah, it's okay. I think for what it is. Obviously, I could go in and I could have optimized it better. But for the time I had, I just had to make some sacrifices.
What does your color channel look like? Your base color? Oh, I guess I'm curious about the roughness as well. Oh
this
man,
is the base color. It looks interesting, and my roughness always takes me 5 years to find the. Oh yeah, the thing. Where is it? There we go. Roughness.
awesome. Yeah, that's
Wait,
super
the
cool.
one I really struggled with the roughness and metallic values for the gold. I would have to say that was something. Also, the reflection captures for that was the most headache-inducing thing about this project, I would say. But other than that, it was manageable, I think.
There's the next question's basically saying, so you didn't talk too much about lighting, unless maybe he had missed it. But how much time do you spend tweaking that?
Yeah, the lighting did go through quite a lot of changes. Actually, I should have maybe talked about that. I do have not very much special lighting going on here. The only thing I have is that I have this directional light that's shining into the place. Like as you can see, this fake setup yeah, of this place breaks all the magic. But this is like the sunlight that's shining into the temple. And then I also have this other fake light that doesn't cast any shadows, actually. That's shining onto here a bit to get those extra rays on the side, because I didn't get them through that other main light that I wanted. And my skylight is also set up this way. Wait a second. It's very low, actually. It's on 1. Because I think I had it before a lot higher. Yeah, it blows out of proportion. But yeah, the lighting was easy in a way, because it's just 2 directional lights and the skybox. But what I did was, and I had that tip from Jairus, he said that I could just kind of fake stuff by putting point lights here and having the reflections come out a bit better. Which I did on some parts, because, as I said, I was struggling a bit to make the gold look more shiny, and that was only working if there was actual light shining onto the gold to get like those stylized light reflections on it. So I had to play a bit with some point lights that they don't cast shadows; they're just there to fill up the place and have some fill lights basically. But I did the same on here, and these little fake caves. There's also always a point light in there. And but most point lights that I had to use for filling the space of it basically was on the main place, because I wanted to have the focus on there and have the gold look more interesting as well.
I can't believe those that's tube lights that you're using for the highlights. That's funny. This next question sounds like an interview question. If you went back to this project, what are some key things you would like to change, add, or redo? And also, your portfolio is crazy inspiring, and congratulations on the job.
Thank you. That's very kind. I think one thing I would change is probably reducing the foliage a bit, maybe. I think in retrospect, I think it's a bit too busy on some parts. You can tell I love to make and add foliage by this scene. I got a bit too excited, maybe. That's probably what I would change. And I would probably also like to do the other side, because I feel like I started doing it and then kind of stopped, and I maybe could have just put some time in it and just make it a bit more fleshed out if I already went this far to model out the thing and make decals and whatever. But oh well. But yeah, I think the main thing I would change is maybe working a bit on the detailing. Having less is more, probably, and I think with this I went a bit overboard on some aspects. That's probably what I would mainly change, to tone down the set dressing, yeah, clean up some areas. But yeah, ran out of time a bit.
You have to cut corners where you can.
Yeah.
Which of your pieces has been your favorite to make, and also look back on your like after making?
I think my most favorite was the birdhouse, because that was one of those things where I didn't feel stressed at all making it. I felt it was like very smooth development, I would say. I was just kind of going along with it, and I was learning stuff at the same time, and it quickly got to a stage I was very happy with. So yeah, I think that one was the most fun to me, because I managed to bring my vision like for this concept to life pretty quickly, quicker than I thought I could, and that was like a nice motivational boost for me as well throughout making it.
There's a question here about having a look at the spline blueprint, but it might be better if it's like, I mean, you can open it, but maybe you have a tutorial that you looked at for helping you understand how this all works.
Yeah, I can definitely link one. I think there's one that I've seen a lot of people refer to as the one with pipes. It's on YouTube. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that one, where the person is making like a pipe system. And I also got some help from my partner Ryan, because he's really great at like blueprints and stuff like that. So he helped me a lot to like optimize it a bit and making sense out of it, because the first one I had was a bit messy in terms of the tiling aspect and the scaling. But then together we managed to make it a bit cleaner to make it work. So never be afraid to ask for help, especially when you feel stuck. And yeah, it's always great to get somebody's perspective on it.
Yeah, I guess we can link that in the questions afterwards. Would you agree that it's best for a beginner artist to start working on realism before trying stylized work? It's a weird.
Yeah, because like saying from my perspective, I think you should just do what you're most interested in, and if you're interested in both, just do like small projects on each side and see what gets you more, or like what fits more to your own vision of what you would like to do in the long term. And if you can't figure that out even straight away after doing those two projects, just continue maybe dipping your toes into both. I know also really great artists who are awesome at doing realism and stylized. So if you like both, go for it. But I don't think there's a rule that as a beginner you should go for realism, because I've been told several times when I was starting art, like 3D art, that I should rather go for realism because there's more jobs in that regard, or that it's more demanded in the industry. So, but I didn't care about that. I was just like, I don't want to do realism. It's not my thing. I enjoy looking at it. I enjoy playing games that are realistic, but it's not something I want to do career-wise. So I just went for stylized straight away as a beginner artist who had no idea about game art and 3D. So just do what you like to do most and what you feel excited about, and that will get you, I think, the furthest in the end.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it much longer as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, don't let other people tell you that you should be doing it a specific way, basically, that it's better to do X and Y. Like, I don't think that's necessary, really.
How long have you been in the industry, and what is your dream studio?
I've been. It's kind of weird because I've been at uni since 2017. I finished this year, but I was working for studios like since 2018 through freelance and then my internship and then my other freelance gigs after that internship. So it's kind of weird. Like I never really know how to like put it in time because at the same time I was at university, but I don't know. Like I could say since 2018, 19 confidently in that regard.
um, what's the name of the hippo, and then how did you go about making the hippo?
The name, I'm not sure actually. I think,
Lisa asked that.
well, yeah, I need to ask Jourdan probably, but I'll just call him Chonky Boss. Because he's
Perfect.
very chunky. um, and how did I make the hippo? I can show you quickly in my Notion board. I have the blockout still. I made it fully with Z-spheres because I'm not a character artist, and I was actually really dreading this part of the project. Was really scared because I'm not into anatomy and humans or anything like that. So I did it all with Z-spheres because that's what usually also I've seen people use that a lot for characters mainly, but I've been depurposing it a lot for trees. So I went the same way about it and blocked it all out with Z-spheres, the hands even, and made the head separately. And then I turned that all into a mesh, but separated the arms again and the and extracted parts of the body to get the necklace and the ornaments that are on him around his like knuckles and his feet, and just sculpted them all separately. And yeah, that's basically it. I had to tromp through that for a while. I think it took me roughly. Let's look at this blog post. That's quite helpful actually. This it took like 2 weeks on and off. I was doing like other things at the same time, like this arch. But yeah, it took like I would probably say in hours, maybe 1 week of work hours if you work full time for the hippo to get it from sculpt to finish thing. But mind you, it's not fully retopoed like as you should do it probably.
I mean, I think for something like this, I think it is okay to
Yeah,
decimate
yeah,
it down. You know, you can
that's
make
what.
the you probably already know this, but the size of the images, you can make them larger if you press
Oh
the
yeah,
yeah.
this for this thing. Yeah. Okay, I
Awesome.
can
Yeah, I
see.
figured people
Yeah,
want to see a
yeah,
bit
that's true.
closer.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably better to see. Yeah, that was like the ugly first attempt on the top left. As you can see, the hands they're just fully broken and the feet is just disintegrating. But then I went for like bigger shapes of the Z spheres, and that worked a lot better to do it. But then I also did more refinement on each hand and looked at a lot of hand references. But for saying that I don't really enjoy anatomy, I did really like sculpting this at the end. It was a better experience than I expected it to be, and probably my favorite prop in this project.
That's awesome. It is the centerpiece of the image, it seems. So it's
Yeah.
like you spent a lot of time on that. Okay, the last question is what was your approach to the God rays? And thank you for this talk. It was very useful and insightful.
Oh, thank you. That's kind. The God rays are actually just on a big plane. They're always a bit awkward to select here. So this big plane I just took and duplicated them around. I'm sure there's probably a more efficient way to do this. But I've got several of these, and they have a material on them that I'll show you quick. It's pretty simple. I also watched a small tutorial about that, which I can link. But basically, these noise textures are panning across so that you can see the slight movement. I think you can see it probably in the scene as well, that the God rays they look a bit smoky in the middle. It's a bit hard to see sometimes, but they have these intervals that they move in. And then there's just some emissive color on it that you can actually see them, and with depth fade, the really great node, you can then make it kind of transition better into the environment. And these kind of more dense parts in the middle, I think I just got them by basically scaling these in crazy amounts around and see what works best. But yeah, it was a bit awkward to line them up because they all have to point to the hippo and be making sense with the sunlight direction as well. So you just have to test it out, because from some angles it will look weird, but I think, as I said, from the player angle, you wouldn't be seeing these weird intersections on the top here. Nobody will go here, so we can just do some liberties here.
Yeah, out of bounds areas. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. Oh no, that's it. But yeah, the shader itself is very simple, as you can see. There's not very fancy stuff going on. Yeah, because as I said, I like to just keep it easy and simple and get to the goal.
Oh, that's awesome. This all looks really good, and thank you for the presentation. I'm sure everyone in chat is really excited about this. This will be on YouTube as well, so
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to link all of your social links and all that stuff in there as well. And yeah, I think this is it. I think you're done.
Yay! I did it. I was so nervous before this.
No, it was great. 35-minute talk, and then another 35 minutes of questions.
Yay! I guess that was well timed, and I'm glad people had questions. I didn't think there would be any, but that's great. I was really happy to answer them all. Thanks everyone for being so kind.
Well, all right. Thank you, Jasmin, and thanks everyone for hanging out. I guess we'll catch you later.
See you soon, guys.
All right, bye.